Could we begin with the housekeeping comments, please?
Thank you for participating in today's meeting. Please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room, and please silence all devices. Click on the globe at the bottom of your screen to select either English or Spanish. Public comment will be taken after each item. If you are in the auditorium and wish to comment, please use the iPads located in the lobby. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide it to a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items, and times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. Word time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you are authorizing recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Supervisor Mitchell, you'll be acting as chair today. Right now, I'm sorry. We also have Mayor McCallum here. I don't see Councilmember Rahman as yet, so we don't have a quorum as yet. Would you like to wait a bit, or do you want to get started?
I see LA City Hall on my screen. Is it just that she's not there, or?
Yeah, Councilmember Rahman should be here in just a minute or two. Apologies
okay, perfect. And so, Wayne, what can we start as a subcommittee of the committee, or would you prefer that we wait for the councilwoman? What is your process?
Thank you, Supervisor. Item 2 and item 3 are informational items. If you like, we could begin the presentation on item 2. But you may want to officially start the meeting as well. Sorry.
Let me, if the councilwoman is just moments away, let me wait. I don't want her to miss the presentation.
Okay.
So we'll wait. Let's do that.
Sure enough.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, council member. Could we go ahead and have staff call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum. Here. Supervisor Perez. Councilmember Rahman.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez. Chair Krakow. And Acting Chair Supervisor Mitchell.
Thank you, Present. We acknowledge the presence of a quorum. So with that, I'd like to call to order the 2024 Friday, August 16th Hybrid Mobile Source Committee meeting to order. Thanks everyone for joining us. Our first agenda item, number 1, to adopt resolution to recognize funds and accept terms and fulfill conditions and requirements of Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Award from the California Department of Transportation, and authorize executive officer to enter into agreement with CAPCOA. We're going to have a staff presentation. Mr. Krause.
Thank you. Good morning, committee. Next slide, please. Okay, so by way of background, by way of background, there is an existing emission estimator computer model called CaliMod. It means California Emissions Estimator Model. This model is owned by CAPCOA, California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, which you all know is a sort of blanket organization that involves all 35 air districts in the state of California. This model is a really, really good model. It's being used by both local agencies and governments, as well as consultants, particularly in the realm of implementing the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, because this model calculates operational and construction emissions from various land use types of projects. So decision makers get an insight through the CEQA documents and through an air quality analysis on what those impacts are going to be as a result of implementing that project. It also looks at greenhouse gases. So to complement the work that's being done in the model for the greenhouse gases, there's an actual handbook that outlines all sorts of different measures that can be taken to help decrease greenhouse gases, and again, the impacts in the community as a result of implementing those projects. So there's a handbook, again, that provides these types of activities. These involve transportation behaviors, vehicle miles traveled, does all these calculations on mobile sources. So it's a really good model, and it's a really good handbook, and we want to continue to support both of these efforts. Next slide, please. However, in order to do that, it does require updates. So since the inception of CaliMod, which started back in 2011, over the years, we've had different updates that are needed. Sometimes there are updates that are more about improving the usage of the model. So things like moving, which is the last big change that we did, we moved it from actual individual desktops you used to download the model onto your individual desktop. It can work there. And now we're improving it, or we have improved it to bring it up to a web-based platform. This allows a lot more interactions with existing databases that are out there. And why are those databases important? Because you want the latest data. You want the latest emission factors. You want the latest trip rates to go into the model. When it comes to the handbook, as time goes on, we learn about new things that can be done. Adapting to a climate change, for example, instead of just trying to necessarily prevent it up front. And in case of transportation side of things, there are ways in which you can reduce your vehicle miles traveled, and there's elements of that. So we wanted to, with new studies and data, wanted to get all those incorporated in there. So just a big note, again, as you can tell, both these tools are pretty interdependent, and we rely on the needs for funding of these updates. So right now, the air districts themselves have been contributing, but sometimes it's just not enough. And so we've actually gone outside to seek out other funding sources, which leads us to the next slide. So what did we do? So we decided to partner up with CAPCOA, which, by the way, we are a member of CAPCOA. As a matter of fact, our executive officer, Wayne Nastry, is a member on the CAPCOA board. And we applied for a Caltrans grant, so a California Transportation Department grant. This grant comes out of their SB1 Sustainable Community Funds, and there's billions of dollars there to be spent to help with these efforts. And so we were able to get awarded a grant last month at $450,000. So we're super excited to be able to get these funds to make these necessary upgrades, not just immediately, but some of the ones in the future as well. However, it does come with a requirement from Caltrans to have an approved resolution from our board to acknowledge the funds. So basically how it would work is our agency would act like we do under a lot of the TAO projects as a pass-through in order to pay for the work that's being done on the computer model. Although CAPCOA will actually be implementing the actual contract for the actual individual activities. So some of those updates I wanted to provide here, such as new transportation measures, new databases. We've got some really cool new reporting features, as well as, of course, as always, increasing the functionality, which is what you do when you do reprogramming. Next slide, please. So basically, we're asking today to adopt the resolution to recognize those funds into our funds, authorizing the executive officer to accept those terms and conditions that are required of the grant, and then also to authorize us to enter an agreement with Capcoa to implement the contracts. And that's
Thank you.
my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none, let's open it up for public comment on agenda item number 1.
Sorry, Chairwoman. Chair Mitchell.
Yes.
I was just wondering whether I could ask one question, which is this tool publicly available or only available to local governments?
No, this tool is publicly available at no charge.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Anyone else? Again, open it up for public comment, please.
There is no public comment here in the building. I don't know if any of the other remote facilities have anything, and there's no one with their hand raised online.
Councilwoman, do you have public there with you?
Not on this item.
All right, and we have no one here at the Hall of Administration. With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the staff recommendation on item 1.
I'll move it. McCallum.
Seconded.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded. Please call roll.
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum. Supervisor Perez absent. Councilmember Rahman.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez absent. Chair Krakow absent. Acting Chair Supervisor Mitchell.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-3 absent.
Thank you very much. We've got 2 informational items on the agenda. So next up is agenda item number 2, which is an update on the proposed memorandum of cooperation on the Pacific Rim Green Maritime Economy.
Supervisor Mitchell, this is Bay. Good morning.
Good morning.
We aren't aware of any campaign contributions made to any board members on this item, and it involves some entities that are based out of China. So we think it's highly unlikely that any campaign contributions would have been received. Our normal process is to get confirmation from the entities involved that they have not made any campaign contributions to board members, but in part because they're based in China, we haven't been able to get that confirmation. So what I would just say is if any of the board members think they may have received a contribution from either Shenzhen Yanshan Port Group or Yanshan International Container Terminals, that they could just recuse themselves from this item. It is an informational item and no action will be taken today. And please let me know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you for that. Any questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none, is there going to be a staff presentation on this?
Yes.
Dr. Reese?
Yes, good morning, members of the committee. So my name is Sarah Reese. I'm a Deputy Executive Officer for Planning, Rule Development and Implementation at South Coast. And today I'm going to talk about our proposed memorandum of cooperation that we're seeking to sign with entities in Shenzhen, China, and Southern California. This is really in vein of reducing emissions associated with trans-Pacific maritime traffic. And as we'll go through this presentation, reducing emissions from ships is a really important priority for us. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. Again, ships are a huge source of NOx in our region, which is the key pollutant causing smog. Right now, trucks are the top source, but ships are soon going to be the top source in the basin. And ships are hard to abate. Ships are largely subject to federal and international regulation. As a local air agency, it's difficult for us to really get our arms around that and figure out a way to meaningfully reduce those emissions. And so we've been thinking creatively for years about how to get at this problem. And way back in 2018, we thought about reaching out to entities in China, recognizing that a lot of the traffic that comes to our ports comes from, goes in between China and us, and then other Pacific Rim entities. And so figuring a way, if there's a way we could get shared collaboration, shared incentives at our different ports that could maybe eventually attract cleaner vessels calling at our ports and benefiting both entities. So we began these discussions with China back in August of 2018, and the Chinese authorities at that time identified Shenzhen as a good potential partner for us. There's a lot of similarities between Shenzhen and our San Pedro Bay ports. There's a lot of traffic that goes between those two ports. And so it seemed that that was a good opportunity for collaboration to see if we could start this program. And so what we're doing today is proposing a memorandum of cooperation with those entities so that we can get this technical collaboration started. Next slide, please. So the purpose, again, is for technology exchange. Perhaps there could be some work on, clean energy programs, looking at green infrastructure development, looking at fueling development and types of fuels that would be used, as well as coordinating perhaps some deployment of technology. And again, the goal of this is to kind of kickstart ways in which we can get reductions of emissions associated with vessels. Ultimately, that has some benefit for economic development, as well as to get us to our air quality goals, both here and in Pacific Rim entities. Next slide, please. The potential parties that we're looking at, so we have some from southern China, Shenzhen, as well as Southern California. So in Shenzhen, we're looking at the North American Representative Office of Shenzhen. That's the office that's based here in the U.S., in Southern California, focusing on basically economic development and trade. The Shenzhen Yantian Port Group, so that's the port entity, as well as the Yantian International Container Terminals. On the Southern California side, it would be South Coast AQMD, as well as the Port of Long Beach. Next slide, please. And you can see that there's potential great dividends here. A lot of the cargo that's imported from Southeast Asia and East Asia is coming through our gateway ports. So if we look at it by shipping weight, it's just about 40% of that's coming to San Pedro ports. If you're looking at it from value, it's about 50%. So given all of that cargo volume coming through, all of those ships coming through, any efforts we can really take to address emissions from those ships could pay big dividends in our region. Next slide, please. And again, when we look at the emissions coming from the ports, ports complex in general, all of the activity associated with those ports is the single largest source of NOx in our region. And the ships are the lion's share of that. The ships are about 57% of the emissions coming from that. And the great majority of those ships are not U.S. flagged. So that means that there's even they're flagged under in international countries. There's even less control in terms of regulations that we could put in place for those. Next slide, please. So in terms of the key interests and potential cooperation, really looking at benefits that could accrue to the ports and port communities around the Pacific Rim. The chart that I show here is a picture of a shipping line route, an actual route that exists, and you can see that this particular route hits Long Beach, Oakland, goes over to Yokohama, down to Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and then other ports in the Pacific before coming back to Long Beach. So again, incentives that could make those ships cleaner could yield great dividends across all of these ports. Also work on port infrastructure, looking at fueling, et cetera. Next slide, please. This MOC can also implement some actions control measures that we have on AQMP, as well as for our SERPs in our 2022 Air Quality Management Plan. Our Pacific Rim Initiative for Maritime Emission Reductions, PRIMER, was one of our control strategies, and that was really that concept of those shared incentives across the Pacific Rim. And then in our 617 SERP for Wilmington, Carson, and West Long Beach, PRIMER is also mentioned there, as that community could stand to benefit from those emission reductions. Next slide, please. So this isn't all we're doing in the shipping space. We're still, really interested in whatever we can do because of the significance of emissions from ships. So we continue to pursue our state and federal grants. We do engage and are starting to engage more with the International Maritime Organization, our U.S. delegation, to make sure that they're raising the kinds of issues that we're seeing, and that work continues to get done. We are working with CARB on updating and improving their emission inventories on ocean-going vessels, and then in general, continue to regularly check in and coordinate with CARB staff. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps, we're going to be bringing this proposed MOC for the board's consideration in September. There is a delegation of us traveling to Shenzhen for the potential signing of the MOC on September 23rd. And then as part of that trip, planning visits to potential terminals that we can partner with, agencies, research institutions, et cetera, both in Shenzhen and in Hong Kong, which is right next door to Shenzhen. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions on your end?
Madam Chair, if I might, is the Port of LA going to be a signatory to this memorandum?
So it's our understanding that Shenzhen has already spoken with the Port of Los Angeles and has entered into an agreement. There's not much known about that. When we asked about bringing Los Angeles into this one, the port's preference for Shenzhen and Yantian was to focus on Port of Long Beach and South Coast AQMD. Regardless, moving forward will be better coordinated with the Port of Los Angeles as part of this effort moving forward.
Well, I noticed there's a public tour of a ship in Port of LA right now with uses methane or methanol or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think is that Maersk, and it's
Maersk,
there's a ship naming event going on.
There's a ship naming event. That's I believe it's next week or week after. But yeah, there'll be a ship naming event for a methanol ship.
Yeah, Maersk. I understand.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
And is methanol the most likely clean shipping fuels that'll we expect to see come out of this agreement, or will there be others, another technology?
Maybe I'll start and Dr. Rees can back me up where I stray, perhaps. I think there are a number of different fuels, Madam Chair, that will be considered. Methanol is one of the fuels. We probably have a greater preference for methanol as opposed to ammonia. Ammonia probably has a greater hydrogen density per volume, and the shipping facilities seem to like that one, but the toxicity concerns, the storage concerns, we believe outweigh the benefit. So that's why we're more supportive of methanol as opposed to ammonia. There are other potential sources when they're looking at these fuels. And, there's been talk about either CNG again or LNG. There's a lot of different efforts that are ongoing to try to define what is the most. And I think what you'll find is that there's going to be different types of fuels at different ports. And so that's something that's really remains to be worked out. I think it's a tremendous challenge. Maybe Dr. Rees has more she'd like to add.
I think you covered it.
Thanks.
Any other questions on this item? Again, it's informational.
Yes, I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to be able to see the language of the actual MOC at some point? And if so, when?
Yes, and we will definitely include it within the board packet.
Got it. And I'm curious about whether you see this effort as likely to result in SIP creditable emissions reductions.
Well, there's a couple of ways in which you can get emission reductions get addressed in the SIP. To be prospective SIP creditable, we would have to enter this MOU to EPA so that it could be incorporated into the SIP. I don't know if we're necessarily anticipating doing that at this point, but you can also then get retrospective emission credits from emission reductions that are actually achieved, right? When you actually put these practices into place and get the benefits of those emission reductions. So I doubt we would be submitting this MOC to EPA for inclusion in the SIP, but that's still, we can still get emission reductions that could count in the future.
How much reductions are you expecting?
We can't really quantify that at this point. I mean, this is really the first step of collaboration to see if we can get, both attract cleaner vessels as well as work on perhaps retrofits of existing fleets. And that's, still a ways off to figure out what we can actually do in that space.
Okay, great. And then I had a question about whether there was a effort to pursue similar agreements with other ports that we do a lot of business with from this region.
Yeah, in general, under our primer initiative, that Pacific Rim Initiative for Maritime Emission Reductions, we have reached out to a number of ports in the past. Shenzhen's really the first entity to step forward and really have a lot of energy to signing an MOC with us and working with us. But we also have talked to Port of Hong Kong, talked to Shanghai. Yeah, we've talked to folks in Korea, in Japan. So it's something that we continue to look at and work. Again, because of the way those vessels, with the ports they travel to on the Pacific Rim, coming back to us all the time, there's a lot of benefit to collaborating with those ports with our shared interests.
Great, thank you. That's all for me.
Excellent. Can we have public comment, please, on agenda item 2?
So online, we have Renee Mullinen.
Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Renee Moylanen, Director of Environmental Planning for the Port of Long Beach, and I'm here to express our support for this item. The ports have had a long cooperative working relationship with the AQMD going back to the Clean Air Action Plan in 2006. And over the years, we've continued to discuss strategy development. We've coordinated on our annual emissions inventories. We've co-funded and partnered on numerous grant and technology advancement projects. So we share the same goals to be good stewards of the environment and to continue to reduce air quality impacts associated with port operations. This proposed memorandum of cooperation between South Coast AQMD, the Port of Long Beach, and port representatives in Shenzhen represents a great opportunity to build on our cooperative approach and partnership. We have found value in these voluntary cooperative partnerships, sharing information on best practices, participating in technical exchanges, and coordinating on pilot projects, especially for global sources like ocean-going vessels. So we look forward to strengthening this relationship with AQMD and Shenzhen. We strongly believe that innovative partnerships and cooperative approaches are the best way to improve air quality from these sources and to protect the health of our local communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. And that concludes the number of speakers that we have online, and we have nobody here in person.
We have an in-person speaker here in LA City Hall.
Great. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Yelenich with the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association. I'd like to thank Sarah for the wonderful presentation, and I would like to second Renee Moylanen's comments. We believe a cooperative approach for tackling vessel emissions is the best and most assured way to achieve emission reductions from ocean-going vessels. PMSA, as we have in the past, would love to work with the South Coast AQMD on achieving these emission reductions. We believe back in January, we had an incredible successful lobbying trip to Washington focusing on these issues, and we would like to continue to cooperate with South Coast on achieving emission reductions with organizations like the International Maritime Organization, US EPA, the California Air Resources Board, and our sister ports in Asia. As Renee said, collaboration and cooperation is the best way to tackle these extremely difficult to reduce source of emissions. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And we don't have any members of the public here to provide public comments. So with that, this is informational item. Thank you so much. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the Coachella Valley Attainment Plan for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard. Dr. Lee is going to provide the presentation.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Sang Lee, Planning and Rules Manager, presenting Coachella Valley Attainment Plan for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard. Next slide. So this presentation is outlined as a brief background and ozone air quality attainment status in the Coachella Valley, followed by control strategy and attainment demonstration. Next slide. Ground level ozone is air pollutants. They are formed chemically in the atmosphere from its precursors, VOC and NOx, in the presence of sunlight. VOC and NOx emissions coming from sources such as vehicles and factories, but they also coming from natural process such as trees and wildfires. Next slide. Ozone has adverse health effects. That includes aggravating emphysema, chronic bronchitis, increases asthma attacks, or irritating airways. National ambient air quality standards are health-based standards designed to protect the public health from this type of harmful air pollutants. Next slide, please. The ozone levels in Coachella Valley is closely tied with those of South Coast Air Basin. Ozone precursors, NOx and VOCs, are emitted in the basin and forms to ozone and transported to Coachella Valley via sea breeze and often cause a high ozone episode. Next slide, please. Still good news is ozone level in Coachella Valley has been improved significantly over past decades. There are 3 different 8-hour ozone standards. First one, 1997 8-hour ozone standard. Coachella is very close to meeting it. And then second one, 2008 8-hour ozone standard is being addressed in this proposed plan. The 2015 ozone standard is addressed in the last 2022 AQMD. Coachella Valley is in attainment for 1979 1-hour ozone standard. Next one. There are 5 different types of non-attainment classification for ozone, with extreme being the most severe air pollution and giving the longest amount of time to attain. Coachella Valley was originally classified as a severe non-attainment. However, due to unforeseen challenges associated with the mobile source emissions model, we voluntarily requested a bump up to next higher classification, extreme. EPA approved the request last year, and this necessitated need to develop a new attainment plan and submit it to EPA by October this year. Next slide, please. So this reclassification set the new attainment due date. So 2031 is our new attainment year. And also Clean Air Act and EPA's regulation requires multiple elements to be included in the plan. They are, for example, emissions inventory, control strategy, attainment demonstration, transportation conformity budget, etc. Next slide. So the strategy to attain this standard in the Coachella Valley relies on the phase-in of previously adopted rules. For example, they are baseline measures, and then recently adopted stationary source rules by South Coast, and the mobile source regulations by CARB and US EPA. In addition to these, the strategies outlined in the 2022 AQMD will ensure the attainment of this standard by the due date, if not earlier. Next slide, please. So specifics of South Coast stationary control measures outlined here in 3 groups. So first one, baseline reductions. refers to the reductions anticipated from the rules, South Coast rules adopted by 2020, and also Refinery Rule 1109.1. The second group is reclaim landing rules. So since 2017, we diligently adopted multiple rules to implement bulk level controls in reclaim facilities and also facilitate potential transition to a command and control structure. Lastly, we also adopted multiple rules in last couple of years that applies to non-reclaimed sources, such as 1111 space heating or 1153.1, the commercial open rules. Next slide. Mobile source strategies, we also outlined here in a similar structure. So the first one, baseline reductions, refers to reductions anticipated from CARB's regulation adopted by 2021. Heavy-duty inspection and maintenance and small off-road engine regulations are expected to bring quite sizable amount of NOx reductions. The CARB also adopted multiple regulations in past 2 to 3 years. For example, advanced clean fleet regulation, in-use locomotive regulation, or in-use off-road diesel fleet regulations. All of this anticipated to bring good amount of NOx reductions. EPA's Clean Truck Program also expect to bring marginal amount of NOx emissions needed for attainment. Next slide. So with this control strategy, so NOx emissions are projected to be decreased substantially. The graph on the left shows the changes in NOx emissions in South Coast Basin. From 2018 to 2031 attainment scenario, NOx emission is projected to decrease by 52%. For the same period, Coachella Valley is expected to have 63% lower NOx emissions. Next slide. With these emission reductions, the ozone levels in the Coachella Valley, including Palm Springs and Indio stations, will have ozone levels lower than 75 ppb, the attainment level, which is a significant progress compared to 2018 level shown in the blue bar here. Next one. This plan is going through public process. A draft was released end of last month. We hosted public consultation meeting Wednesday of this week. And then we also plan to brief Eastern Coachella community on September 5th and bring it back for board consideration in October, followed by submittal to EPA. Next one. So in summary, Coachella Valley is an extreme non-attainment for the 2008 8-hour ozone standard. We developed an attainment plan to attain the standard by the due date or actual attainment year 2031 by relying on continued implementation of already adopted rules and regulations. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
And Dr. Lee, thank you very much for the presentation. Any board member questions or comments? All right, seeing none, let's open it up for public comment, please.
There's no one here in the auditorium for public comment, and there's no one online that has their hand raised, Madam Chair.
All right, Councilwoman, anyone there?
Not on this item, thank you.
All right, none here in the Hall of Administration either. Again, this was informational purposes. Colleagues, items 4 through 6, agenda items are receive and file written reports that do not require presentations. Are there any questions or comments from board members on agenda items 4 through 6?
Now, Madam Chair, I would like to just ask a question on item 4.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Do we have any idea what the emission reductions have been with this warehouse indirect source rule to date?
We can get you that information, Mayor.
I would like to know, what reductions we think we've achieved, if we've achieved any, or are we just making money?
I can tell you that we have achieved emission reductions. I don't know the exact number, so we'll get back to you on.
Wayne, if I may, from our annual report in October, which we reported back here in March, it was about 1 to 1.5 ton per day of reduction.
In NOx?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then our next annual report will be updating those numbers.
Do we have PM 2.5 also?
I believe we do. I'll be able to, we'll be able to get back to you with those numbers.
Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions on the items 4 through 6, the written reports? Okay, hearing none. Does anyone else have any other business that should be brought before the committee? Agenda item 7. Seeing none, agenda item 8. Let's open it up for general public comment.
No hands raised here and no one here for public comment, Madam Chair.
No one here in LA City Hall for public comment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This concludes today's Mobile Source Committee meeting, and the next one is scheduled for Friday, September 20th at 9 a.m. Thanks, everyone. Have a good Friday.
Thank you.